Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Levi Zane. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Levi Zane. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another VIP episode of Hero Paranormal Podcast with me. My name is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, here to bring it to you, coming from just south of Area 51 in Nevada, Sin City, the Silver State, the most illuminated and bright place on the planet. Well, not right now. Things aren't looking so bright. It is, there's a lot going on. We have asteroids, we have viruses, we have division among perception and what we think is going on. And to boot, nobody really knows what the point of it all is. There's a lot of people that are just like, finally, it's time. The virus is actually humanity. Let it all just happen. Well, I'm not exactly. I think we are not a virus, and we are creators. And we are architects of our own futures, and especially our country is pretty amazing at all the above. So we're talking to someone who, in my opinion, is a pretty amazing guy, pretty amazing background. He's done his own research. He's a veteran, a former police officer, government contractor, and family man. And he's had an obsession of reading ancient texts to either corroborate or refute his Christian faith, and has reached a startling conclusion. A conclusion that our guest, Jeffery Sortino, is going to share with us. Now, he spent many years doing this, and he has a BS in biology. His research is extensive, and you're going to love where it's going. You're just going to love it. Before we get there, if you haven't yet, please go to heroparanormal.com. Check it out. That is the podcast website. You can keep in touch with everything going on. You can even become a patron there. I believe our lowest tier is like $1 a month. You can also just donate once if you want. And we haven't added any more expensive tiers yet. I know I've been promising I'm going to do it. I will. I promise eventually. I'm just, there's so much going on. It's hard to keep your pulse on it all. So it'll happen. I promise. And definitely subscribe on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. Hero Paranormal. You should be able to find us. And with no further ado, the man with the plan, looking as far back as humanity lets him look. Jeffery Sortino. Welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, Ryan. Appreciate it.
It's really cool that you came on because your book it reminds me a lot of a lot of people who have very interesting cosmic experiences, and without giving too much away, the name of the book is The Identity of God, and it's the search for an identification of God through ancient texts, which, it is so neat. I wanted to let you kind of go into what started you along this path. You had a lot of very personal things in the book that took place to you, and I can kind of relate to that. That's so cool, and I think it makes it more legitimate. But what took you along this path, Jeff, and what led you here?
I guess what led me along the path really is just, I was just living my life. I was brought up in the church by my mother, and made sure that, we were going to church all the time, and the Christian church. When people say which church, to me there is no other church. Most of the United States is Christian, most of it. So I mean the Christian church when I say the church. And we were brought up Protestant. I ended up marrying a Catholic woman. Both my kids were baptized Catholic. I was baptized Baptist, but we went around when I was younger to all kinds of different Protestant churches. It's whatever was convenient, because we moved around a lot. So we would end up going to a Lutheran or a Methodist or a Baptist or whatever was available. But mainly, just being brought up and having a strong belief in God till, I can't remember when I didn't. I've always had that strong belief. It's been kind of indoctrinated in me. And I still do. I just look at it much differently now. And we'll go into that, I guess. But yeah, just being raised in the church is what got me into this. But as I was growing up, I was always told when you had questions about the Bible, you would go to either an elder or your minister or pastor. If it was Catholicism, it would be a priest, somebody that was supposedly more knowledgeable than you were about the Bible. And if you had any question whatsoever, you would ask them, and usually they didn't have an answer. They would they'd either say, pray about it, and it'll come to you. If it really means that much to you, he'll answer you. Or it would be a cop-out answer like, there's some things man wasn't meant to know, or we can't try to even understand the mind of God because we're just merely men. So, I would always get those kind of answers. So eventually, sometime around 20, 21, something like that, I started realizing that, you know what? I'm going to try to find out some of these answers myself. Now, I was always told not to read anything other than the Bible. If you read if you read anything other than the Bible, the church is always like, it's just the devil trying to confuse you. Just read only the Bible. That's all you need to know. So I finally got over that fear, and I started reading all kinds of different texts. And I ended up, it was biblical to begin with. So, anything dealing with the Bible. The books of the Apocrypha, like the Book of Enoch, Book of Giants. There's a number of books I wanted to see. They're all are associated with the Bible. The Book of Jubilees, all the Gnostics, the books that were not put into the Bible and was canonized at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD by Emperor Constantine. Because Emperor Constantine of the Roman Empire is the one that basically did the biggest push for Christianity in the world. It wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for him actually making it the official religion of the Roman Empire as it was falling. The Roman Empire was deteriorating at this time, but it was still an empire, and Constantine was in control. So he converted to Christianity and made it the official religion. So that really helped Christianity spread across the world. But anyway, we got into this, and I don't know. I just started reading these different texts and trying to find those answers. It still says in the Bible, God made man, and it says, let us make him in our image and after our likeness. And that's one of the questions I would have. I would say, well, why does it say our if it's just God? Usually the answer comes back as the Trinity, because they're trying to explain it. The church and the people associated with the church are trying to explain it because they don't know either. So they say, it's the Trinity they're talking about. And if you don't know what the Trinity is, it's three hypostases with God. It's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Supposedly they're all separate, but they're all the same, which makes no sense to me, and it never did, really. I was trying to wrap my head around it, so I set out to look for that. And I read all those different texts looking for answers, and I never really found anything. So I started looking towards, I found a lot of knowledge that I didn't know, but not the answers I was looking for, the epiphany that I was looking for. Like most people, they want a definite answer to whatever their question is. They're looking for some lost knowledge that will revolutionize their whole way of thinking. A lot of these texts that I've read didn't really revolutionize everything I was thinking, but I learned a lot that I didn't learn from reading the Bible. but I kept looking elsewhere then. So if I couldn't find it in these extra biblical texts, I started looking at, outside the Bible, other religions. I took world religions in college. It got me thinking as well. So it's probably one of the things that spurred me on to read some of these other things. Like looking into Buddhism, I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Hinduism and the Vedics. Actually, I didn't read the Vedics until, I read just this year. I read the Mahabharata and the Ramayana this past year, because I'd never really read the Vedics. I always, I learned about them through other people, but I got sick of listening to what other people said about it, and I decided to read it for myself. I did the same thing with the Quran. I got sick of people telling me what was in the Quran and what it said, so I set out to read it myself. So I read the whole thing cover to cover, and I was moved by it a little bit. I tried to change my way of living by trying not to eat pork, which, if you've ever done that in the United States, it's pretty much impossible. I mean, there's also so many foods that I love to eat. You got pepperoni and sausage on everything. Sausage on anything breakfast. There's all kinds of things out there that are made of pork. So that didn't last too long. What else did I read? I read all kinds of different things. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Chaldean Account of Genesis by Dr. George Smith. I got a number of them in my book that I mentioned, and I summarized all of those books that I had read in a picture of the cover of each. Oh, there's just so many to read. But anyway, I hit pay dirt, basically, when I found the Sumerian Tablets. And the Chaldean Account of Genesis by Dr. George Smith was probably the thing that really turned me on to that, and I started reading other things. And then I eventually found Sitchin. If you don't know who Zechariah Sitchin was, I mean, his works are kind of controversial because they contain a lot of information from the Sumerian Tablets, but also his own interpretations. So, that's what got me started into it. I don't know, I just read kind of all of those things, but your original question, I think, was, you said you talked about something in my book that, some personal matters. Is that correct?
Yeah, just kind of, I see what got you into it. I see what got you into it as far as, for sure, as far as, reading all the texts. I mean, oh my gosh, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Quran. I'm mesmerized actually with the Quran, with, some of the stuff it has about the jinn, but we'll talk about that. But the identity of God is such a great, it's such a great title. And I believe it to be the truth of your book. I like that you brought up the in our image, the Trinity, kind of that cosmic intelligence that they're all pointing to, but can't pinpoint. Yeah, what got you down the path of the research? Was it like I mean, you sort of answered it, and I think you. Go ahead.
I see where you're going with that, and I was trying to understand the question exactly. I mean, there's no one thing that kind of pinpointed me or pushed me in that direction. There was a number of things. Some of the things, I mentioned in my book about how some bad things happened in my life. And I kind of go over some of those bad things that happened. I don't know, if you don't mind, I'll go into one of the stories here. Okay, this happened sometime when I was a teenager, very young teenager. I was not yet a man. I was still a boy. But this story is always hard to talk about, even though I've lived my whole life with it since, and I had to get over it and everything. But still, every time you talk about it, it can be tough. One time, we're living in Georgia. My stepfather was in the Army. He ends up moving over to Germany while my brother, myself, and my mother are living in Georgia, and we're waiting to go over to Germany. But that's how it works in the military. Whoever's in the military first, either the male or the female spouse, whatever, goes over first, and the family stays behind, and they wait until everything's set up for them, and then they come over. So we're babysit a neighbor's girl who's like 6 years old, 5 years old, something like that. And I really don't know the girl, but my mother knew their parents or whatever, and he said, "Okay, we'll babysit her." So, but they had to go somewhere for the night. So my mother made my brother sleep in my bed, and the little girl got in my brother's bed. There's only 3 bedrooms. So we go to bed, no big deal. Everything's just normal as usual. But then in the middle of the night, I'm woken up. And when I'm woken up, it turns out that there's a stranger waking me up. I look up, and I'm totally confused, trying to come out of a slumber. I was pretty deep sleep, and the whole room is flooded with lights. Red and blue flashing lights all over the place. And the stranger, I look up, and he's wearing some type of uniform, like a blue uniform, mustache, wearing glasses, and he says, "You got to get up, son." So, I start to get up. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I look over, and there's someone else trying to wake my brother up. And we don't know who these people are, but there's red and blue lights all over the place. I can hear commotion going on in the house. I hear my mother in the next room, and she's screaming, and hysterically, like blood curdling. So I knew something was definitely wrong. So I ended up getting up, and they got us quickly dressed or whatever, and then they started to push us downstairs. It turns out these 2 guys that were in our room were paramedics. So, and they're waking us up and trying to get us downstairs, and as we're going downstairs, we got to pass my mother's room. And as we pass through by the door, I can see my mother over next to the bed on the floor, up against the wall on the far side of the room, and her knees are up, and she's got her hands out, and she's screaming. She's naked, and she's screaming hysterically. Anytime that another paramedic, is in the room trying to get close to her with a blanket, but she can't get close to her because of the blood-curdling screams, that she's freaking out every time this lady gets close to her. So I don't know what's going on. I suddenly stop right in the doorway because I see this, and, my first instinct as her son is to want to help her. I love my mother, so I want to go in there. But as soon as I stopped, the paramedic behind me just pushed me forward and just kept me moving. So we moved down the stairs and moved us outside, and we got us outside to the parking lot. And we were on base. We were on a military base, but right in a really bad neighborhood, and we lived right close to the border where they had fencing and everything like that. That separated the base from the community. Anyway, it was a real bad community in Atlanta, Georgia. But anyway, we get out to the parking lot, and we're surrounded by, there's tons of cops there. There's plainclothes detectives. There's all kinds of stuff there. And so many vehicles, ambulances, police cars, MP vehicles. It's military police as well. But, the sheriff, everything. The whole thing was packed full of vehicles, and lights are going everywhere. The whole neighborhood is up. Everyone's kind of coming out onto their doorstep in their robes and stuff, wondering what's going on. So they get us over to the vehicles, and they're going to take us somewhere. But I still don't know what's going on. So I'm listening to everybody, and we're asking what's going on, me and my brother. And then one of the paramedics, actually, I can't remember if it was paramedic or if it was one of the plainclothes detectives, went ahead and just told me, because they were kind of beating around the bush with each other, trying to figure out how they were going to tell us. So they went ahead and, one told us, he said, "Son, your mother has gone through a really hard time. She's been raped." And then I'm like, oh. And then I knew what was happening. But to see your mother screaming like that is I don't know. When you see the fear in someone's eyes and you can't help them, it really hurts. So anyway, they took us away, and we stayed with our friends for a little bit. My mother's friend, her best friend at the time. So we stayed with her. But even after about a week of my mother being taken and put in evaluation as well, because she wasn't all there. It's like she went crazy. And she later told me that she had an out-of-body experience because it's the only way she could survive, disassociating her mind with what was going on. Because this guy just, rapists and just rape sometimes. He beat the living crap out of her, close to death. He ended up putting a pillowcase over her head and putting a gun to her head and saying, "You do what I tell you, or I'm going to kill your kids." So he used her own love against her. And given that situation, she thought of her kids more than she did herself. So, and this guy too didn't just, wasn't a one-time thing and he left. He ended up staying, and he took his time, rested, smoked cigarettes, whatever, and then he raped her again. And then he raped her again. And then he finally left before daybreak or before 3 a.m. or something. I can't remember exactly. I remember it was early morning, very early morning when everybody was out. It was still dark. Sun wasn't coming out. So anyway, that was going on. And after about a week of her going through the evaluation and coming back, we ended up coming out to help her because we see that, the hospital workers and stuff help her out of the car, and me and my brother want to rush to help her because we love our mother. So we rush to help her, and within, I want to say about 30 to 25 feet, she sees us coming. And even though we're her sons, we're still males. And she freaks out and starts balking and starts going, kind of pushing backward, even though the two workers are on her arms trying to help her move forward. And she's trying to push backwards because I see total fear in her eyes. And that stopped me in my tracks. So me and my brother couldn't even go near her for a while. Anyway, she eventually got over this, thank goodness, over years. She went through therapy and stuff. She had some relapses, but anyway, they found the guy, if anyone wants to know. He was wanted for murder, and he had raped my best friend's mother, which I did not know, the night before. So he was a serial rapist, and he had killed a couple people. So when they finally got him, they caught him, he ended up pleading out and admitting to the rapes to get off on the murder charges so he wouldn't get the death penalty. He got life in prison. I don't know who he is. No one would tell me then, and eventually I lost interest once he got life in prison. So anyway, that is one of the stories that went on. But the thing is I kept thinking to myself as the years went by too, why would God let this happen? We were good people. I mean, I can't think of anyone more pure of heart and honest and loving than my own mother. And why would God let this happen? So that got the ball rolling, more or less. And it's probably one of the reasons I became a police officer as well. Some years later, you have to take I can't even talk to him. Psychological evaluation to get onto the police force. I worked for 3 different agencies during my lifetime. But on the first one, it was really in depth, and the psychiatrist really got into why I wanted to be a police officer and what spurred that. What spurs these feelings of me wanting to protect people and protect the weak? And it really got me thinking. I never really thought about the situation the story I just told, as the main factor or whatever. But we got into it, and I was bawling like a baby by the time I left. But he really drew it out, and it's probably the same reason one of the main ones that spurred me to look into, the origins of God, or are there any other answers anywhere? So that's one of the things that got into. There's some other stories I go into in the book that tell about my personal life and everything, but I don't want the whole book to be about my personal life. So I quickly move on to talking about going into world religion, studying that in college, and then there was a long time before I started actually reading some ancient texts, because again I was always told don't read anything other than the Bible, so I didn't. I was pretty devout at one time, so devout that my mother, long after this incident had happened to her, but my mother thought that I was susceptible to being in a cult because I was going to church all the time and going to Bible study twice a week, and much more than anyone else in the family. My father, who divorced from my mother a long time ago, back when I was 9, he's an atheist, always has. Is an agnostic. He believes in a higher power, but I had this obsession. So I started looking into it and reading all these different texts. Well, I ended up hitting pay dirt again when I found the Sumerian Tablets, because the Sumerian Tablets basically contain the same stories as what is in Genesis. So there's some similarity there, and that was kind of like almost like the epiphany that I was looking for, because I was looking for something that referred to the same stories I'd been learning in the Bible, but mainly it's Genesis. So there's some Exodus I go over in my book as well, because I do a comparative analysis between the Sumerian Tablets and Genesis and some Exodus. But so when I say the Bible, I mean Genesis and Exodus, because the rest of the Bible basically is based off of Genesis. And our whole concept of God is based off of what we learn in Genesis. And the same tablets are, well, the oldest ones anyway, are 2,000 years older than when Abraham, the patriarch in Genesis, 2,000 years older than when he was even born. So that leads me to conclude two things. Either the Sumerian Tablets are the basis of what Genesis was based on. So basically not plagiarism, but actually taken from those tablets, right? Or they both share a common text that's older than both. Either way, you're learning knowledge about Genesis that we never had before, because for 2,000 years or so, that's all we've had to go on. But in 1849, the first Sumerian tablets were discovered. The first 30,000 of them. They were discovered in Nineveh, Iraq. And they were written in what they call cuneiform writing. And this cuneiform writing laid undeciphered basically for almost 100 years, about 75 years or so, before modern scholars and stuff started studying it and comparing it to other languages and was able to make something out of it. We're learning more and more all the time. The Ivy League schools are got teams of people translating to try to get good translations. You got the Oriental and African studies in the University of London. You got some premier scholars there that are looking into it. Two of which I kind of follow are Dr. Andrew George, he's the director, and then Dr. Irving Finkel. You can find both those people on YouTube doing lectures. Boring for a lot of people, but interesting for me. So, anyway, does that explain some of the questions that you had?
Exactly. And that's kind of what I thought. And thank you for your service, not only for serving in our military, but also for, serving our civilians as a police officer. But yeah, that's I came to that assumption. I didn't know for sure if that may have done anything about it. And there's other stories in the book that I have to tell our listeners are mind-blowing, like so wild. I wanted to ask you also, but I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to like concentrate on your stories, but I think they're so good that
right.
that it's a really good mix. I do believe that you kind of hit that sweet spot as far as being able to mix those stories with the actual research. And I kind of wanted to take it there to the research, that is, and kind of the post-flood Tower of Babel, Abraham, Sodom and Gomorrah, this idea. And I don't want to let too much out of your book because it does mention some things, and I don't want to kind of like tell the whole story of the book because you have to read the whole book, but it's kind of a neat idea, if we can talk about it, the idea of Earth being surveyed after the flood and the damage was done, and where that led.
Right. Yeah, and before we even get there, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about even before the flood.
Yeah.
Because the Sumerian Tablets talk about before the flood. It's fascinating as well because we learn a lot, after the flood. We learn some of the information from the Bible, which is in there, but it doesn't talk a lot about what happens before the flood. According to the Sumerian tablets, and I'll just cut to the right and tell the people and the listeners here what the Sumerian tablets actually say, as far as who God is and who the angels are and stuff like that. Basically, they describe aliens. They describe that they came here because they weren't of Earth, and basically the definition of alien is anything that is not of Earth or born on Earth are aliens. So whether you think of these beings as interdimensional or physical beings from and are extraterrestrial from this universe, from this realm or whatever, it doesn't matter because they're both still fit that definition of aliens. Now, it's my opinion that they have the technology. I don't think they have they might have it, but their actual innate abilities to jump in to this dimension or this universe, into this realm from their realm. I think they do it with technology. I've read The Watchers and The Watchers 2, which at first I thought was too far-fetched in fiction when I was younger, and then later I was thinking there might be something to this. And there is a story in there where Betty Andreessen, from the Betty Andreessen abduction case, she was asking them, because she had been abducted or whatever by these human-looking alien-type beings that were tall, muscular, either blonde or whitish hair. They end up, she asked them, is this technology you're using? How do you do these things? And it was explained to her from this being that he says that their technology is based on physical and spiritual. And he said, man will never know the spiritual. He only knows the physical part. So there's a lot that we don't know dealing with physics and other things, dealing with the spirit that we don't know about yet. Everyone thinks that we're, the pinnacle of creation and the pinnacle of intelligence, and that we know so much on this planet that we don't know much more. There's not that much to learn. I say it's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we don't understand about the universe and let alone our own planet. And I kind of lost my. Oh yeah, we're talking about before the flood. That's right. Well, Sitchin, if everyone's familiar with Zecharia Sitchin, like I said, his works are kind of controversial, but nobody, even his critics and people that don't believe anything that he wrote or whatever, they owe everything to him anyway. Because even his critics that don't agree with him would not have known about the Sumerian Tablets, wouldn't looked into it, wouldn't looked into these civilizations that used cuneiform writing. They wouldn't have looked into the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Hittite, the Elamite, the Persians. They wouldn't look into all these great empires that once existed. Aside from a few museum curators or some, few archaeologists that deal in that, no one would be talking about this at all if it wasn't for Sitchin. So whether you love him or hate him, Sitchin is the one that brought this to us, and he deserves the credit. So anyway. The controversial part of Sitchin's work is that everyone thinks he wasn't translating everything right, because it doesn't match up exactly to what the scholars have translated in the Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation, like the 7 days it took to create heaven and earth in the Bible. The 7 tablets of creation talk about the creation of heaven and earth. But it is mainly a story of the battle of the gods, the celestial gods. And Sitchin took this as a metaphor, like they were writing it. These ancient people were writing this as a metaphor for the formation of our solar system. So I'm going to go into the interpretation of what Sitchin said, and not exactly what the tablets say, because, it's like Yoda speech sometimes. It's talking backwards, and you have to, it's not hard to read the translation, but to try to figure everything out, you got to go pretty slow sometimes. But Sitchin tries to put it in plain English, and his metaphor for the construction of our solar system the way it is today, and that is where we get the God created the heavens and the earth. So the way that he interpreted it is that what started out in our solar system was just the sun and Mercury. And out of the sun came this protoplasmic ball of mass or whatever, which is controversial in itself, because today this theory, that's not the prevailing theory. They think that there was all this dust from the Big Bang and all, it coalesced to create the planets where they are. But we don't know that. That's a theory. No one really knows that for sure. And it doesn't explain. There's so much space and dust in between the planets. There are things out there, but there's so much space that it just doesn't make sense. So they try to say that the solar wind blew it all out. Well, if the solar wind blew it all out, they wouldn't have coalesced the way that they are. So their own theory doesn't really make sense. So we don't know how planets form. So anyway, this protoplasmic ball comes out, and it finally settles somewhere where the asteroid belt is. And out of this giant protoplasmic mass, which eventually became a planet, right, came out the other planets. They were born as twins. So first plopped out Venus and Mars. So, and I never really noticed this before too, when you look at the size of the planets and stuff, they may not be exactly the same, but they're kind of roughly the same sizes when we're talking about them in pairs, like Venus and Mars. They're almost the same size. And then out next came Uranus and Neptune. And then finally the gas giants, Saturn and Jupiter. Now, what caused this? I don't know. The formation of our solar system is very chaotic. There may have been another star or galaxy passing close by, and the gravitational forces decided to pull this mass out of the planet, that originally gave birth to the other planets. Who knows? We don't know. But this supposedly is what happened. And then, still there was chaos. All the planets didn't have an orbit. The protoplasmic mass that became a planet itself that gave birth to all the other planets, the Sumerians called Tiamat. So what happened next, called Nibiru, according to Sitchin, it was a rogue planet, not part of our solar system, that was and ended up getting caught by the gravitational forces of some of our other outer planets. And it brought it in, and as it came closer and closer, it ends up coming so close to Tiamat that one of its moons struck it directly. And there was a celestial collision. Velikovsky is another author that ended up writing a book called Worlds in Collision. This would be congruent with what his theories are. So that moon hit that planet. Half that planet was knocked into a orbit closer to the sun. So when that half of that planet got into its position closer to the sun, it coalesced even more, because it was kind of half a planet. So it eventually coalesced. I'm sure it was molten or whatever. It became Earth. And then the other half of the planet was torn and crushed by the immense gravity and stuff of this other planet that was close by and got strung out. into its own orbit, the orbit that was already in, but the Sumerians called it the hammered bracelet, and that's basically our asteroid belt. So now this planet is caught, this Nibiru, and this Nibiru is supposedly the planet that these beings are from, is actually part of our solar system. This is Sitchin's theory. And this planet now is caught by our sun, and is part of the solar system, and has an orbit now like a comet, not like the regular planets, but like a comet, and orbits for 3,600 years. And every time it comes back in our solar system after 3,600 years, it creates some chaos from the gravitational forces with the other planets. It's like pinball or pool or whatever. The gravitational forces are working against each other, and it causes some calamities. If it's as close as it can be when Earth is in its orbit, as close as it can be to this planet, you get maybe the flood. It definitely kicks rocks. This planet probably kicks rocks from the asteroid belt towards Earth if it doesn't drag them along with them. And it could create a small debris tail or something, and we could actually, our planet might be in its regular orbit and actually fall into that tail or that debris. Or some bigger rocks might just be kicked towards us. And it causes calamities. More eruptions, more volcanic eruptions, more earthquakes, and stuff like that. Now, if it's on the opposite side of the sun from when this planet crosses, we may not have any effect. No one would even hardly know. But every 3,600 years it's supposed to happen. So was Sitchin correct? We don't know. We don't know if he's 100% correct, but I think he's on to something. There are three things that I think support his theory. And one is the presence of Planet 9. That's what the modern-day astronomers call Planet 9 today. They have mathematically proven that there is another planet, a large planet, out there in our solar system. And they calculate that from the perturbations that it has on the other planets. And they can mathematically calculate this. They can see it. So, and this is already accepted math. It's accepted science by the International Astronomical Union. So this isn't like fairy tale stuff. This is exactly what modern astronomers have calculated. Now, they don't think it's Sitchin's Nibiru. They don't believe any of that. And they can't prove anything. Usually they don't believe anything until they can prove it. And it's very, very hard to prove the existence of a planet out in deep space that's dark and it's hard to see. So, anyway, and Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin of Caltech University are the astronomers that mathematically calculated the existence of Planet 9, and they're still searching for it. We just haven't seen it. And we won't be able to call it more than a theory, I guess, until we actually see this planet. But it has been mathematically proven. So the existence of Planet 9 is one thing that supports Sitchin. The second one is no scientist today would argue that the continents used to fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. We're taught that in grade school, even. We're taught that in school. All used to fit together in one landmass that they called Pangea. Okay, I have seen computer simulations with all the continents put back together and taking away the oceans. And you take away the oceans, you can totally Pacific Basin is totally scooped out. I'd call it half a planet, but it looks like there's a large portion of our planet is missing when you see those simulations. Are the simulations correct? Don't know, but that's what the computer simulations are coming up with. I know what I was seeing, so that has support to it. And then, at least support to Earth and being the same planet as the asteroids and comets. The comets are the pieces that broke free, and they have their own orbits now. But the comets, the asteroid belt, and the Earth supposedly were the same planet. Now, the third thing that I'd like to go over that supports Sitchin's theory, at least that Earth was the same planet as the asteroid belt, is that today's scientists have used the sensors on our asteroids, on our probes and stuff like that, and they're able to determine that the water ice on the asteroid belt is an exact match to, the deuterium to H2O isotopic ratio of the water ice on the asteroids is an exact match to that of the oceans on our Earth. And this deuterium to H2O isotopic ratio does not match the water ice that we found on Mars, nor does it fit the water vapor that they detected that's present along with tons of other gases, poisonous gases, on Venus. So why is it that deuterium to H2O isotopic ratio matches exactly those the Earth's oceans? So today scientists have a theory that the Earth was bombarded with all these different asteroids and stuff, enough to fill up our oceans with this water. I think that's less plausible than Sitchin's theory, that the Earth was the same planet as the asteroid belt. That, to me, that makes a lot more sense, and Occam's razor tells us that the simplest solution is probably the correct one, so I would go with that. So that's what happened before the flood. Is there any particular place you'd like to take up after the flood?
Well, I think you nailed, it's kind of crazy. I have this list of questions and you are just killing it. You're just nailing them one after the other. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it is. With Stitchin, I'm really glad that you're going down this pathway because he gets it from all sides. You've got the group of people that say when the CIA is interested in you, you're no longer valid. But then again, if he's that important that they're interested, it's got to make you wonder. And I like that you mentioned Nibiru in the 3,600 years and how it comes by and just kind of dusts the place, and yeah, no, I think you're nailing it exactly where I wanted to go. And the H2O comment with the water and the asteroid belt, this is one of those areas where when science stops making sense, it gets difficult. When historical texts start to make sense, totally get that leap of faith. And I've taken it. I think you've nailed it. I'm willing to go wherever you want to go from here, Jeff. You're just killing it.
Well, eventually, before the flood again, because we had to fast forward from the formation of the universe, or not the universe, but the solar system, and fast forward to approximately, again, this is Sitchin's approximation, 342,000 BC. That's when these beings, the ones that we call angels, Anunnaki, is what the Sumerians called them, that they came to Earth. Now, scientists don't believe that they're aliens, right? They believe that the texts say what they say, but they don't agree with Sitchin's interpretations. They don't agree that Nibiru is a planet, because in the Enuma Elish it says the gods retreated to Nibir, and it's not Nibiru, it's Nibir, but that's what Sitchin was talking about. But we don't know what Nibir is. The Babylonians ended up calling Nibiru Jupiter. So that's what the Babylonians did. The Akkadians and Sumerians and stuff were, it seems like they were pretty clear that Nibiru was not Jupiter, but the Babylonians called Jupiter Nibiru. So that's what they think, that is Nibiru, and there's not another planet out there. But as we can see, Planet 9 is out there, so who knows? Maybe Sitchin was a lot more right than what what scientists are willing to admit. We don't know. The time will tell. But these beings came here, and for whatever reason they came here, because Sitchin said it was to mine gold for their dying planet, for its chemical properties. The text really didn't say exactly, but they were here. And when they were here, they had a mission. Oops, sorry about that. And they had a mission, and their people rebelled. It was hard work for what they were doing there. They were mining, they were digging, they were doing all kinds of things. And so they needed a worker to take over the work of the people, of their beings, because they rebelled. Their leaders were going to end up killing some of them, in front of them and make them work. And then just like political factions today, we got Democrats and Republicans here in the United States, and they got the Labor Party and Tory Party and stuff like that in Britain. You know, you have different factions. And like some people wanted to be strict and kill people in front of the other angels and stuff, kill them, because the angels can die. It's just that supposedly they live to be like 1,000,000 years old or 800,000 here on Earth or something, because they age differently because they're closer to the sun or whatever. So they're not immortal, these beings that are spoken of in the Sumerian Tablets, but they might as well be to us because they live so freaking long. Anyway, they needed a worker. So one of these people spoke up, and it's Enki in the Sumerian Tablets. He spoke up and said, I can create a worker, and I can fix this. So the creature that we could create this new worker from already exists on this planet. So what they did is they took their own DNA and spliced it with the hominid that was already on this planet, that was already evolved on this planet, and created us. Probably not the way we are today, because they were tampering with, and they were crossing their males were, sleeping with our females. They found them attractive, and that's written in Genesis. So, and that was an abomination to one of the leaders of these beings, one of the royal leaders of these beings. And they said, no, you can't be crossing species. It's gross. I'm pretty sure that if we humans had shore leave from a Navy ship and all the men went out there and found chimpanzees on the land and decided to start having sex with chimpanzees, I'm sure, their leaders are going to be pretty upset about that. And most people would think it's gross. So anyway, what had happened was one political faction was against all this. The other political faction said, you have to understand, we're so far away from home. Our mission is super important. They're lonely. They took human wives, or they took humans as wives, human females as wives. So, and then one of the leaders decided that, they want the humans gone. He didn't want them created in the first place. But after a while, they made too much noise, according to the Sumerian Tablets, and he wants them gone. He used to use famine and plague and all kinds of things to the god that he, was called Namtar in the Sumerian Tablets. He was the god of plagues and stuff, and it was his role to try to create these famines and plagues to wipe out some of the humans, not totally wipe them out, but to call them every now and then, because there's too many of them. And his leader, Enlil, or Elu in some texts, but Sitchin calls him Enlil, same character. He's kind of the number one guy on the planet. His father supposedly is king on another planet. But on this planet, with the mission, he is the leader. And his half-brother, Enki. His half-brother, Enki, is next in line. They're both princes to the throne. And Enki's the one that created humans, but he's also his symbol is the serpent. So we see that the serpent was in the Garden of Eden, and Enki is the one that created us, but he's the one that loved us, and this can get very controversial towards Christianity, because basically what these stories say is that Genesis is a conflation. They take two stories and combine them into one. It's missing information. The Adam and Eve story is a conflation. Yes, Adam and Eve were the first man and woman created in the Garden of Eden, but it was many generations later that it was Adapa and Titi that were actually kicked out of the Garden of Eden. It wasn't Adam and Eve. And also during the creation, Adam and Eve were the first man and woman created, but then the Anunnaki created 6 more males and 6 more females immediately after. So we had 7. And they killed one of their own people, their beings, one of the Anunnaki, and used his life force, essence, spirit, and DNA, and mixed it with that of a hominid that was already here on the planet, and created us. many years later, after cross-fertilization, after DNA tampering and stuff, mankind kept changing. And we are what we are today. And I think the consensus is that we are called Homo sapiens sapiens now. So where do these beings go? A lot of people think that they are still here. A lot of people think that they're all gone. But the consensus seems to be, if you actually believe the stories, is that they will return one day. If they are here now, they haven't shown themselves, but they all will return one day. And I still think they're fighting over mankind and control of the earth, and they'll have a final battle, if you believe the stories, just like Armageddon in the Bible. So I hope this kind of explains some of the questions.
It totally does. And for those listeners that are listening, the book goes as far as explain really some theories as to when that day might be that they come back. There's some really neat stuff that the book goes into, but you're gonna have to read it. There's some really neat revelations in there. And I just wanted to thank you, Jeff, for all the research that, I can't even imagine the thousands of man hours and sharing and the contribution to all of us. Where can everybody get your book? How can they keep in touch with you? And I just wanted to say thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I've been waiting, and I'm happy that we finally made it happen.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. You can go to see me on Facebook. It's under the name of the same name as the title of the book, The Identity of God. I have a Facebook page there. I'm also I've been the chief editor now for a Facebook group called Ancient Astronaut Theorists. We have like 217,000 members right now. I've been the chief editor for a year or so. You could probably find me there as well. I'll be at Fan Expo in June here in Dallas. I'll be at the Alien Con in Dallas. Probably there's a UFO conference in Kansas City in July that I'll be in as well. So I'm making the rounds and trying to get it out there.
Well, it's obvious that you care about getting the message out and you care about people. And thank you for all your service in every single way. Thank you for being on the podcast, Jeff. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Jeff Sortino. I'm telling you, there's no doubt there's not a better guy out there for taking these crumbs that many cultures before us have left and exposing them. Not only that, you'll have to get the book. It is called The Identity of God by Jeff Sortino. It goes into all kinds of top secret, classified information on UFOs, existence of extraterrestrials, how it ties in with the Anunnaki, with Egyptian Book of the Dead, Enki, Anu. It goes into there's really the writings, the descriptions, and some of the really cool things that the book reveals. And I really wish I could just go into that and tell you guys all that from my perspective, having read the book, but I can't give it all away. But there are some amazing revelations. Really amazing stuff. The Identity of God by Jeff Sortino. Highly recommend. I hope you are all surviving this COVID-19 delirium, coronavirus pandemic scare, depending on whatever you believe is happening. It is a real virus. It is hurting and killing people. It is not what the media is making it out to appear to be. And we'll keep the patron goodness coming. We're getting a patron premium status coming soon. Can't wait to reveal that. Space Wolf Research. Go to spacewolfresearch.com. Check it out. It's something we do for the science factions of our community, researchers, and the best minds investigating the biggest questions for humanity. Anyway, long story short, had somebody drive through the fence and trying to sneak a peek. The same stuff we're trying to research, but the thousands and thousands of dollars of damage is the part that's what hurts the most. You can see the same stuff from the road. You didn't have to do that, whoever did that. But Hey, it is what it is. I am not one of the cosmic intelligences or gatekeepers or entities that is in charge of making or describing or analyzing these situations. No, I'm just going to make the best of the situation to my best ability. I'm a human being, and apparently it's a lot cooler than we think it is. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Levi Zane. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Levi Zane. Blast off.